Auschwitz-Birkenau is located in southern Poland. It is about a 3.5-hour drive from Warsaw and about a 1-hour drive from Krakow. In this aerial view, you can see the size comparison between Auschwitz I and Auschwitz II. Auschwitz I is right here, and Auschwitz II, Birkenau, is located here. The distance between the two camps is about 1.5 miles and would take about 30 minutes to walk. In this aerial, we zoomed in and you can see the parking lot here. And if you were visiting, you would go through this building and then down a path to the famous gates that says Arbeit macht frei. And then upon entering, there are numerous barracks that you can visit. Over here is the gas chamber. Down here, kind of off the picture, is the commandant's house. So we will enter here through the gates, and then we will kind of methodically go down several of these barracks to see what is inside them that visitors can see. We're going to start at the entrance of Auschwitz and work our way back to barrack number 11. We'll start by entering the main gate, and then we'll make a stop where the orchestra played, and then our third stop will be where roll call was held. In the corner down here is the same picture from the previous slide, the actual aerial view, and so you can see we're going to start here and make our way to where the star is. The famous gate at the entrance to Auschwitz with the phrase Arbeit macht frei, or work will set you free. Although the phrase is most known for being on the gate at Auschwitz, the phrase was used on the gates of several other concentration camps as well. In this close-up of the word Arbeit, do you notice anything unusual about it? What do you notice about the letter B? Prisoners were made to construct the gate, and many feel the upside-down B was a secret act of defiance, and perhaps a silent warning to others that things were not as they appear to be. The original sign was stolen by neo-Nazis in 2009. It was found several days later, cut into 3 segments. The segments were returned to Auschwitz and repaired. However, the sign that has hung since then is a replica. This is where the camp orchestra played. The picture on the left is an enlargement of the sign you see on the right. It reads, "The camp orchestra had to assemble here to play marches while the prisoners filed past. This was to help prisoners keep in step and make it easier to count them as they went to and from work." On the left are the collective gallows, which are located outside the camp kitchen. Here, up to 12 prisoners could be executed by hanging at one time. The photo to the right shows a portion of the roll call square, and you can see the collective gallows in the distance. When hangings took place, they were often done during roll call to set an example in front of the other prisoners. From the roll call square, we'll make our way back to Block 4. Block 4 contains information and artifacts related to the extermination of prisoners. This is a large model of Crematorium 2. Crematorium 2 and 3 had the same design and had a T-shaped layout. You can kind of see that on this diagram where it goes across and then this part comes out. On this model, you have one arm, the other arm, and then this one that comes out. Victims were led to an underground dressing room. From there, they were herded into the underground gas chamber, which is here. Zyklon B pellets were dropped in from shafts in the ceiling by Nazis wearing gas masks. The pellets reacted with air and released hydrogen cyanide, a poisonous gas that caused death by asphyxiation. The corpses were then put on elevators and sent up to the crematorium to be burned to ash. It is estimated that 1,440 people could be gassed at one time in each Crematorium 2 and 3. Crematorium 4 and Crematorium 5 were built above ground, were slightly smaller, and were capable of holding about 768 victims in each gas chamber. I've zoomed into this area, which is where people would walk above ground and then go downstairs below ground into the undressing chamber. I've zoomed in closer and you can see men, women, and children disrobed, awaiting entrance into the gas chamber. The model of the gas chamber depicts the horrors that went on inside. Scratch marks could be found on the walls and on other victims as they desperately tried to claw their way up, fighting for air. The Sonderkommander, who were tasked with removing the bodies, spoke of the bodily fluid, vomit, urine, feces, blood, that covered many of the victims as their bodies succumbed to asphyxiation. What took place in these gas chambers was not simply the release of a gas that made people drowsy and silently suffocate. The hydrogen cyanide gas would have made every breath hideously painful, and the men, women, children, and infants would have been panic-stricken and experienced a terror we cannot even fathom. On this slide, you can see the Sonderkommando up here. They had to take the corpses from in the gas chamber and put them on lifts that were raised up. And from here, they were put in the crematorium so that their bodies would be burned to ash. Empty cans of Zyklon B, and in the middle, examples of what Zyklon B pellets would have looked like. The pellets were sealed in canisters. During a gassing, Nazis wearing gas masks would pour the pellets down shafts in the ceiling of the gas chamber. As the pellets reacted with air, hydrogen cyanide gas was released, which was able to kill victims in about 20 minutes. Zyklon was originally used as a pesticide and a disinfectant, but it was the Nazis who decided to use it as a means of mass extermination. Next, we'll move from Block 4 over to Block 5. Block 5 contains a selection of some of the personal effects people brought with them during deportation to Auschwitz. Although the Nazis tried to destroy most of the evidence of the camps, the items on the next few slides show some of the items that survived. This room contains suitcases belonging to some of the Jews who were deported to Auschwitz. This room has a collection of pots, pans, bowls, cups, and other cookware. At first glance, these may just seem like random items. However, keep in mind that when people were rounded up from their homes and liquidated from the ghettos, they were told to only pack necessary items. So actually, these items are not random at all. Each pot and pan you see was significant enough to someone to be packed. One large room is filled with the shoes of those deported to Auschwitz. While thousands of shoes are on display, they only represent a small portion of those deported here. If you look closely, you can see that some of the pairs of shoes are tied together. This was all part of the Nazis' plan of deception. Prior to entering the gas chamber, people first entered the undressing room and were told to tie their shoes together so that it would be easier to find after their shower. They were also told to remember the number on the hook they hung their clothes on so they would be easy to locate after their shower. As you can see from these photos, there are a few red shoes that tend to stand out, but otherwise, most of the shoes are black or brown. It's interesting to think how shoe colors have changed since the 1930s and 40s. If you were to ask, say, a high school class to all put their shoes in a pile, think about how shoes today would look very different from the shoes in these photographs. The photo on the left shows a room full of various brushes. The photo on the right shows a collection of intertwined wire eyeglasses. Like the shoes from the previous slide, it's interesting to note how these glasses all have similar frames and how a collection of glasses today would look quite different. Also on display are prosthetic limbs and other assistive devices that belong to deportees. Many of those with obvious physical or mental disabilities were taken immediately to the gas chamber. Next, we'll move from Block 5 to Block 6. The corridor of Block 6 is lined with photographs of some of the men and women murdered at Auschwitz. These photos were taken during part of the registration process. Listed under each photo is the person's name, camp number, country of origin, date of birth, occupation, date they were deported to Auschwitz, and the day they died at Auschwitz. For example, this is Danuta. Here is her camp number, 18294. Her country of origin, Poland. She was born March 10th, 1921. Her occupation, she was a nurse. She was deported to Auschwitz on August 25th, 1942, and she died in Auschwitz on October 29th, 1942. These are two signs on display in Block 6. The one on the left shows prisoner tattoos, which were normally tattooed on the arm, but they could be tattooed other places, such as on the chest or leg. Over on the right-hand side, it shows marks for distinguishing different categories of prisoners. So they would have a patch that corresponds to which category they fall under. For example, the red triangle is for political prisoners. The green triangle is for criminals. Purple triangle is for Jehovah's Witnesses. Pink triangle for homosexuals. The SU was for Soviet prisoners of war. They also had a couple of other ones for the Gypsies and Roma and asocials. Depending on the year, if a person was also Jewish, they either had a yellow triangle that was affixed with the other triangle, or if it was later, a yellow line across the top, which signified that they were Jewish. In this case are examples of clothing and shoes the prisoners were made to wear. Oftentimes they were just handed a striped uniform and pair of shoes, without regard if they were the right size or not. Their prison numbers and distinguishing mark were sewn onto their uniforms. For example, the shirt on the right has prison number A13166 sewn on it. It's also kind of hard to see in this photo, but the distinguishing marks consist of a pink triangle on top of a yellow triangle. The pink triangle would identify this person as homosexual, and the yellow triangle would identify them as being Jewish. The photographs along this wall show the effects of starvation. The sign says the photos of the women were taken in May 1945, showing liberated prisoners after intensive 4-month-long medical care. The photographs of the children were taken immediately after the liberation. The woman on the left is a 31-year-old Polish woman who was sent to Auschwitz in May 1943. Before arriving, she weighed 165 pounds. At the time this photo was taken, she weighed 55 pounds. The woman to the right is a 37-year-old Jewish woman from Belgium. She was sent to Auschwitz in April 1944. Before arriving, she weighed 132 pounds. At the time this photo was taken, she weighed 77 pounds. Up until about 1943, most of those arriving to Auschwitz were photographed in 3 different poses as part of the registration process. Poses consisted of a side view, a front view, and a 3/4 view wearing headgear. Each was identified with a number and their nationality or category. In this room, pictures of children and teenagers are shown. Records show that this girl's name is Christina. In the eyes of the Nazis, names were no longer relevant. Everyone was no more than an assigned number. The Nazis only saw this girl as Polish prisoner 27129. As you can see from the display, Christina was only 13 years old when she was murdered 5 months after arriving at Auschwitz. While it is very moving to look at the wall of children's faces, I have always been especially moved by Christina's eyes. When I look in her eyes, I see fear of the unknown and sadness. Yet I also sense an incredible braveness as she looks straight into the lens of the Nazis' camera. A sample of children's clothing found at Auschwitz upon liberation are displayed in this case. Now we'll continue towards the end of this pathway to blocks 10 and 11. This is the pathway we are walking down to reach blocks 10 and 11. Medical experiments were performed on women inside Block 10. This block is not open for public viewing. The sign outside Block 10 reads, "Several hundred women prisoners, mainly Jewish, were held in 2 upstairs rooms of this block and used as human guinea pigs for sterilization experiments conducted by Professor Dr. Karl Klauberg, a German gynecologist, from April 1943 to May 1944. Some of them died from the treatment they received. Others were murdered so that autopsies could be performed on them. Those who survived were left with permanent injuries. Other SS doctors also conducted experiments on women in this block." Here we see the entrance to the courtyard located between Block 10 to the left and Block 11 to the right. Straight ahead is the death wall where thousands of prisoners were shot. In the courtyard, as we look towards Block 10, we can notice a couple of things. First is that you can notice all of the windows are boarded up. This was so that the women in Block 10 could not view the executions that took place in the courtyard. Second, you can see a couple of slanted posts with a single hook at the top. These posts were used as a form of punishment. Inmates had their hands tied behind their back and were then hung so that their legs dangled. This form of torture often caused the inmates' shoulders to dislocate. Here is a closer look at the execution, or death wall. Thousands of prisoners were shot here between 1941 and 1943. Many of those executed here were Polish political prisoners, but others, such as Soviet POWs and Jews, were also shot here. Block 11 primarily functioned as a camp jail. Visitors are asked to refrain from taking any photographs in the basement. Here to the right, you can see a diagram of what the cells look like. In the basement, there are several types of cells, such as standing cells, which only had enough room for prisoners to stand, dark cells, which had limited light and limited fresh air, starvation cells, where prisoners were put to die of starvation. Before Zyklon B was used in gas chambers, it was first tested in a mass killing in the basement of Block 11. It was here that around 600 Soviet POWs and 250 Polish prisoners became victims of the first trial of mass killing using Zyklon B in September 1941. Next, we'll visit blocks 20, 21, and 27. This is the first room to the left that you'll see as you enter Block 20. In this room, thousands of people were murdered by lethal injection of phenol into the heart. Once injected, death usually occurred within a matter of seconds. Inside Block 21 is an exhibit focusing on the Jews who were deported to Auschwitz from the Netherlands. One entire wall lists the names of those deported from the Netherlands. This enlarged picture of a segment of the wall gives you an idea of how many names are actually represented along this wall. Block 27 contains the Book of Names exhibit. The Book of Names contains a list of over 4.8 million victims of the Holocaust. The inscription on the wall reads, "The names of the murdered are inscribed in this book as an eternal memorial." As you can see from the pictures on the right, the book wraps all the way around the wall. The picture on the left shows you how small the print is on each of these pages, which gives you an idea of the scale of lives lost during the Shoah. The last site we'll visit at Auschwitz will be the gas chamber at Crematorium 1. We were just at Block 27, and so now we're going to go all the way down here to Crematorium 1. The next two slides include photos along our path. This is the entrance to Crematorium 1. It is the only one at Auschwitz still intact. The 4 crematoria at Birkenau were all destroyed. You can see the chimney to the left. As we enter, we'll turn right and make our way to the gas chamber. Nazis would stand on the roof and pour Zyklon B pellets through shafts in the ceiling of the gas chamber. The photo on the right is one of those shafts taken from inside the gas chamber looking up. The photo on the left is inside the gas chamber. Photographs are allowed inside the gas chamber. The sign that you see is saying not to leave lit candles there. This is what the gas chamber looked like when I visited in 2017. Do you see how the back wall looks like it's 2 different colors? That's because this darker section is actually a separate wall that is in front of the back wall. If you go around this wall, you'll be at the back door of the gas chamber. When I was at Auschwitz in 2022, they had visitors entering the gas chamber from the back door. Now, instead of half the gas chamber being roped off, only a small corner was roped off near the front door where you used to be able to enter. This setup means that visitors are now able to freely walk around the gas chamber. Personally, I preferred the other setup where half the gas chamber was roped off because I felt it was more respectful. The photo on the left shows the entrance to Crematorium 1 and the path that leads to the rear of the building. The middle photo is the back entrance to the gas chamber. The photo to the right is of the gallows. It was here in April 1947 that former camp commandant Rudolf Höss was sentenced to death by hanging. In the room to the left of the gas chamber are 2 crematorium furnaces. You can see the tracks that carts were pushed along to transport bodies into the furnaces. In this aerial view, you can see that the camp commandant's house was just down the road from the gas chamber. This photo is taken from the gas chamber looking down that road towards the commandant's house. You can barely see the tip of the house here, but when I zoom in, you can see more of it. We've now returned to the gate where we began, this time with a better understanding of what took place here.